Hello, baseball family. Matthew here with another artist interview for the Negro League Museum fundraiser. I'm thrilled to have alongside me, well, I say alongside me, from the side of the pond, uh, Graig Kreindler, who is a fantastic artist. Graig, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you so much for having me.
No, thanks. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube and on Facebook Live, you'll have to look over Greg's shoulder to see that isn't a photograph. That is actually an example of his work, which is why I was really excited to get him on today. I was actually showing my mum some pictures of your work today, and she was like, "They've got to be photographs." I was like, "No, no, that
Oh,
is how talented this guy is." So I
oh, thank you.
suppose the first question I suppose I'm going to ask you, which I've asked everyone else, is why do you do what you do?
That's a good question. Yeah. I sometimes I wonder that myself, but I I kind of always figured that I was going to be, an artist growing up. It wasn't even when I was younger. It's kind of like I was a good draftsman or something like that, and I just figured that I would do art, but I hadn't really fell in love with a subject matter yet. And eventually, after a lot of schooling and a lot of experimenting and things like that, I kind of came to baseball. Actually, came back to baseball, and when I did my first, quote unquote, mature painting of a baseball scene, something just really kind of clicked, and it's really been in my heart ever since to do this stuff. Like this is what I feel like I'm, not to sound, flighty, but I feel like this is my job. Like this is why I'm put on this earth to do this stuff. Hopefully I will continue to feel that way, because otherwise I have no idea what I'm going to do.
It is fantastic, and I'm glad you do what you do because it has been a visual delight. It's amazing. Um,
Thank
so
you.
you prefer to paint um baseball players that have passed away that are no longer with us. Is there any reason that you prefer that over current players?
Well, I think I was just kind of always drawn to the players of the past because, for the most part, I only knew them as, names, and kind of people in black and white photographs. Uh, I'm 40 years old. I was born in 1980, so I grew up watching. I was a big Yankee fan, so I grew up watching people like Don Mattingly and Ricky Henderson. And if you're watching a game from the '80s or '90s or anytime now, you're seeing these guys in color. You're seeing them from so many different angles. You're seeing Sports Center covering these games, and the media, the national media, even international media, covering them. And so you're kind of getting a taste of each game, each play of each game from every conceivable angle in color, in 4K. It's this mind-boggling dissemination of this media. And with the older guys, it was kind of like, well, they lived in the same world that the Ricky Hendersons and the Don Mattingly's did or do. The world was in color then. We don't necessarily have any, that much tangible proof, other than my dad saying that the world wasn't black and white when I was a kid. Uh, so I think I'm really attracted to, uh, more than a colorization, but it's kind of like it's an attraction to trying to bring these men and women back to life, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, perfectly. If you were to do a current athlete, who would you pick?
Current athlete, and would it have to be baseball or?
No, 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 because I know that you've done a few pieces that aren't baseball related.
Yeah. um Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know. There are a lot of athletes in basketball who I think are pretty beautiful. um but my it's like my heart still goes back to kind of classic basketball, and my heart goes back to classic baseball. This is what I think. I don't know if this guy counts because he's semi recently retired, but I really loved Ichiro. I loved watching him play.
Yes.
I was really happy when he came to the Yankees, even though it was about 10 or 15 years later than I would have wanted it to be, but whatever. I would love to paint him more. I've painted him once and I'd like to do it again. I love him. I'm going to be painting Mike Trout once or twice coming up, so I'm excited about that. It's kind of a new thing for me to dive into more recent players, but those two I'm definitely excited to do paintings of.
Yeah, I think got some good choices there. Good choices.
Thanks.
I have a small piece of my heart for the Seattle Mariners, so Ichiro's. Great player. What's your background within art, like your education, or like what got you into art to start with? I know you touched on it briefly in the first question, but like what age did you know that you wanted to do art?
So I mean, I guess I started drawing when I was about 4 or 5. And how old are you?
I'm 40, 1980s kid like you.
Oh, okay, great. So here, I'm not sure if they had this overseas, and excuse me if they don't, but stuff like He-Man and GI Joe when we were growing up. So I used to watch that stuff all the time, and I would kind of try to draw characters from those shows, and that was kind of like where my love of drawing kind of developed. And eventually I kind of discovered my father's baseball cards, the ones that his mother did not throw out. And I kind of, I guess he was a child of the 40s, like the late 40s and the early 50s. And that's where his baseball cards were from. And the majority of those cards were actually illustrated. They weren't used. They didn't use photographs. These Topps and Bowman issues. So I saw them, and I think when I was young, something kind of clicked in my head that I could draw, or I could try to draw these cards. I could try to kind of copy them. I wasn't necessarily thinking that I wanted to kind of pursue this as a vocation or whatever. It was just kind of like, oh, well, my dad's hero is Mickey Mantle. Why don't I draw him a picture of Mickey Mantle, and he'll like it, hopefully. So I did that, and I continued to draw as I kind of grew older, and I became an adolescent, and I kind of got into comic books and didn't necessarily fall out of love with baseball, but just shift my attention towards other things. I went through puberty, got awkward, was concerned about girls who were ignoring me and things like that. So art wasn't necessarily like at the forefront of my life. And then, high school comes around, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll go to art school because I like drawing, and I don't know what I'm going to do with myself otherwise. So I ended up going to the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, which is a private art school. And they had and still have a very good illustration program. So my goal was to kind of go there and learn how to be kind of a professional commercial artist. I was kind of into the idea of being a book cover illustrator for science fiction and fantasy books.
Awesome.
So I went there, I tried it out, I busted my butt, and I didn't fall out of love with the subject matter. I always liked it, but I didn't feel like I liked it enough. So I floundered a little bit, and I tried to find something to kind of hold on to, something that, that was meaningful to me. And right around then was when I did my first baseball painting.
Who was it that you did for your first baseball painting?
It was Mickey Mantle.
Oh,
and it was the same thing. It was to fulfill, an assignment in school, but at the same time, something for my dad. Oh, he'll love this, hopefully.
Did he?
He did.
Yeah.
They still have, my parents live in Florida right now, and they've been there for the past, 10 years, full time. And, they have the painting kind of like hanging up on their wall still. And every time I go down to visit them, I see it, and I know that they still love it and everything. But I look at it, I'm like, I did this painting almost 20 years ago. Like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. There's so much I would change, so much I would handle differently. Uh, it's a shame, but they still really like it, so that makes me happy.
That's brilliant. Supportive parents, brilliant.
Oh, absolutely.
So how is it? Do you work? How do you go from, say, a blank canvas to that stunning piece that's behind you? What's your process?
So it starts with I guess an idea. I think these days it's more so the idea of the client, because I'm for the most part just doing kind of like commission work right now.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have a certain player that they want me to paint, I'll kind of go back and forth with them over email with a few images or kind of visuals that I think are appealing, and we'll both kind of decide on something. Usually, I'm kind of drawn towards something that has some kind of compelling light, because that's kind of like my favorite part of painting, is kind of putting players in breathable spaces, and a space in which you can kind of recall being there even if you never were there, but just being connected to it through like light and color. uh, I kind of go in that direction, and the client will pick something, and I'll buy the initial supplies, which will be stretcher bars and unprimed linen, and I'll stretch the canvas myself. I will size it and then prime it, and then get a drawing down, like kind of not even so much of an outline. It's more of like a topographical map where I'm doing an outline, but also kind of making notes of changes in value, changes in color kind of on the painting, just like little notes for myself that I have to keep aware of in my head while I'm working. But I'll get the drawing down, I'll spray fix it, and I'll put a wash of color on it, usually kind of like a brownish wash. And then I just kind of jump into painting, and it takes, I guess it takes as long as it takes. It kind of varies by the size of the piece and the complexity of it. So, something like the Dizzy Dean portrait, if I'm working on that and nothing else, and not dealing with two toddlers, then I can usually get it done in about a month or so, something that size.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you do quite a different, like from looking at your website before, you do quite a few different sizes, don't you? So you've got your baseball cards, but then you've got your panoramics. I mean, the panoramics are just phenomenal. Like how long does one of those pieces of work take you to do?
Oh, thank you. I'm almost embarrassed to say, because some of them, well, okay, at the very least, we're talking a few months, just from the elbow grease that kind of goes into actually making the piece, and I guess achieving whatever it is that I want to achieve. But there are a couple of paintings that have taken over a year to do, and that's not, again, that's not me working on something just that one piece every day. It's kind of like jumping back and forth, because sometimes I need a break, sometimes I just need fresh eyes on the piece. Sometimes there's something in the painting that I have to do extra research on, that I just want to make sure that I get kind of historically accurate. Sometimes something else that a client needs like sooner, that kind of might take precedent, or if it's a commercial job. So it's all over the place. But I have certain clients who've been waiting a very long time for their paintings, and they've been super patient and really lovely about it. I think it helps that they know that I have kids, at these ages, so they're understanding for the most part.
Yeah, mine's just turned 3. He's literally just asleep across our way, which is why I'm probably using my softer Mancunian accent today than my usual shouty one. Yeah, I think it's the level of detail that's in your work is incredible. What
Thank you.
paints do you use? Are you oils or are you like oil paint?
Yeah, all oil paints.
Unreal, brilliant. So what do you think is integral to the work of an artist?
Um, I think what I've kind of discovered, just in my own process, I think it's important, and I mean, maybe, yeah, it probably is maybe the most integral thing, especially for me, is having the passion
Mm,
to not only not only to paint and create or go about whatever artistic process you have, but I think having a passion for your subject matter, uh, I think that's really really important, because I think that when you're able to kind of single out what that is, uh, and focus on that and kind of build a career or build a life of making pictures that are, in line with that passion, I think that makes for the best work that you can do, in my opinion. But yeah, others might think differently. I just know for sure that if I was doing a painting that wasn't baseball related or wasn't sports related, um, for the most part, I think my heart wouldn't be in it. And then I think even if it's intangible, I think that the painting wouldn't necessarily be as good as something that I did that I was really passionate about.
no, I get the same sort of responses and answers from a few people I've spoken to. So
Oh yeah,
creativity, passion, yeah, it's all the same stuff.
yeah, it's
Um,
important.
yeah, definitely, it's cool. I think suppose it's one of the things that keeps me doing what I do, because I never thought I was going to get past maybe 2 or 3 episodes of doing a podcast about British baseball, but the passionate people out there, um, and the stories and people wanting to contribute just drives me on. Like, I feel like a big responsibility to my guests to get everything right for them, because there's such a great bunch, and I just want everything to go right for them. So it's
Well,
yeah,
that's
great
great
set of
though.
people. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, probably as well as anyone that people in the baseball, uh, I don't know if you'd call it industry, but people who are passionate about the game are passionate about different things. And some of those things, to outsiders who don't necessarily love baseball or don't follow the game, stuff might seem so incredibly weird. But when you get somebody passionate talking about that kind of stuff, that weird stuff, I
Mm.
think that's the best.
Yeah, it's very engaging. There's a few people I listen
Yeah.
to when they talk about their baseball stories. I'm just completely hooked. Just I sometimes
Yeah.
forget just to take notes, because I'm just, yeah, I can listen to some people talk about baseball for hours and end, and it's just the best. Um, so which of the stuff that you do, your style, like, which do you prefer doing the most? Is it the baseball cards, or is it the larger pictures, or the headshots? Which do you enjoy the most?
I like them all, not equally, but I did baseball cards last year for a just a set for Tops, and it was the first time that I had done work that appeared in a baseball card or on a baseball card, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, but I have never wanted to really be known as a baseball card artist. I just kind of wanted to be just like kind of a general baseball artist. Uh, I think for me, some days I really, really like having a portrait to do, so I can, focus on an individual player and his or her story. And other days it's kind of like I want to do a panoramic. I want to do Ebbets Field in 1955. With the wall in right field and Hilda Chester in the stands and whatever. Uh, it depends on the mood. I I try not to be. Uh, I guess I try to be a bit. I don't know if I want to say that I try to be well-rounded. But I always think that baseball is kind of this big woven tapestry, and I think that each thread is just as important as the next one. So Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, these people who were kind of legends of the game, as important as they are, I still think that the role players in the game, the people who we don't necessarily know anymore, the names that have been kind of forgotten in history, I find them being just as important to the game, because I just think that the whole story of the game and how it kind of exploded into this first nationwide thing and then a worldwide thing. I think everybody involved kind of deserves to be uh, not not honored, with a painting. That sounds really weird, but they deserve to be recognized, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand what you mean. Yeah, yeah, it makes sense. Um, is there any particular piece of art that you love that isn't your own?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, I mean, baseball or non-baseball or
Yeah, either.
oh man, I'm all over the place. Um, baseball art. If I'm starting there, I mean, some of the people I was influenced by, Bill Purdom, Leroy Neiman, Andy Jarinko, uh, Thomas Akins, Andy Warhol, in all weird ways. Current guys and girls, like Anika Orok and Blake Jameson and uh, Jose Tellier and like people like that. I love the different flavors that they bring to their artwork and the baseball world. Gary Sierkowski, like man, I could name thousands, but outside of the baseball realm, um, I have like there's one artist. He's a current living artist, thankfully, he was actually my teacher at one of my teachers at SVA at the School of Visual Arts, and he uh, he became a good friend after I left there, and he was an illustrator for about I think 25, 30 years or something, and he retired. He stopped doing illustration and started doing uh, more fine art, more landscape art, and he his work I always have an emotional response to. He's very much into light and color. He's kind of the guy who kind of instilled that love of light and color into me. Um, so when I see him and I see his work, I can get caught up in those paintings in a really personal way. I'm not just looking at the visual calligraphy of his strokes or whatever. I'm not just looking at value changes and color changes and everything. It's like I'm experiencing uh, these paintings kind of in a way that runs parallel to how he's making them, because I guess he's kind of he's in my life. Um, so I guess I just have a connection to it. And his name, I don't think I mentioned his name. His name is Peter Fiore. He's a great landscape painter. But outside of him, I love a lot of stuff. John Singer Sargent, a big fan of him and his contemporaries. Uh, Andrew Zorn and Joaquin Sorolla. I love Monet. I love Odd Nerdrum and Steve Assel and Mondrian and Rothko. Like I'm everywhere, I guess.
That's cool.
That was a
Um,
long answer. I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. It's fine. It's your chance to tell people why you love who you love and who your influences are. And it's really interesting that there's so many different names and different styles and different varieties. Um, yeah, it's pretty cool. Is what do you think makes your work stand out um the most?
um, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I guess that I guess I have to, maybe first I have to agree that I guess the work stands out. I mean, I hope it does. Just, for whatever reason it does. I think maybe what I do that a lot of other artists don't do, um, maybe is I try to kind of come to each painting with kind of a classic approach, like an academic approach, and I try to kind of recreate these scenes, and show these players kind of as they were, as they happened. I'm not necessarily putting like a montage together of like 5 images of Mickey Mantle on one painting. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's just not the way I do stuff. I'm more concerned with, I guess, just really creating like um, a window to the past, like an accurate window to the past. And that's, I think, maybe that's what I do differently than a lot of the other artists. But I could be wrong, because there might be artists who do that who I just don't know of.
Do you work in a studio or do you work at home?
Well, I have my studio at in my house, actually, or
Okay.
my apartment.
Is there anything that you can't live without in your studio whilst you're working?
Mm, anything I can't live without.
You have to have like a certain breakfast or just into music, or uh, does the temperature have to be the right thing, or I don't know, anything that you sort of feel like you can't be without?
You know what? These days, my kids need to not be there, or they need to be asleep. Sorry.
I just spat my drink everywhere.
I'm sorry. And I say that in the hope that they never see this, but
How you said the toddlers? How old are they?
3 and 5.
Right, I can see. I've just got vision in my head now of this amazing piece of work, and your 3-year-old coming and going, "Daddy,"
Oh my God.
paint handprints right in the middle.
Yeah, it's funny because they're very good in that they understand that you're not supposed to touch daddy's paintings, and you have to be careful when they're in the studio or whatever, and that's fine. And they don't eat any oil paint or cut themselves on palette knives, which is great. But uh they're 3 and 5, and they're boys, and they're rambunctious, and I mean it's hard to kind of stand there and try to concentrate on whatever it is that I'm doing,
Yeah,
and have them right there doing something, or even in the apartment, because I'm worried that something's going on, or that I need to be the present father, which I always am anyway. But
yeah, yeah.
that, yeah, the peace and quiet from them is probably most important these days.
Uh, do, have any of them got um the art? So have you seen any creative sparks coming from either of them in terms of artistry?
Well, my 5-year-old, he's just kind of started getting into drawing,
Huh?
and he's actually said on more than one occasion that when he grows up, he wants to be a painter like daddy, and that
Nice.
scares the living shit out of me. I I mean, that's beautiful, and it warms my heart to think of him, standing next to me, painting on his easel and me painting on my easel. But the life of an artist, man, the life of a creative, it's hard. It's hard. And thankfully, my wife is a writer, um, so we both understand, that we need to be in our own creative space, physically, mentally, whatever. Um, and I think we're lucky in that we found each other and we understand that.
Yeah.
Uh, I just, I don't know. I don't know what my kids are going to grow up to understand. Like, I wonder if they're going to look at what we do and, you know, think that that's normal, you know, that I'm always home and my wife is always home, and we're always, you know, like banging our heads on, I'm banging my head on easel and my wife is banging her head on her computer. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. But yeah, the 5-year-old has definitely started drawing a little bit, and that's really cool.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that the rock and roll world of data analytics that I'm involved in is not as rock and roll as I make it out to be. I think
No. Yeah, but sometimes, you know, I feel like doing something like that would be so much more fulfilling. I don't know. Maybe the grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
sometimes there's no grass. It's just spilt green paint.
It's true. It's very true.
One of the questions I was going to ask as well is what does your art mean to you? But I could pretty much tell it's quite an important and quite a big part of your life.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of hard to articulate, but it's uh, it's it's almost like it's everything, you know. In addition to my family, um, it's everything. The people who have you know, who have like jobs, like 9 to 5 jobs or whatever, you know, I know that a lot of them are able to kind of go to work, do their stuff, clock out, and like mentally kind of check out and come home to like a different kind of life, and they're able to turn off the work stuff. But with me, and I think a lot of the artists that I know, they never get to turn off the work stuff. Like the art is kind of always there, and that passion and that yearning to create or to do something. So it's very much a huge part of me.
Yeah.
It's it's something that, you know, if I don't do it for a few days, if I'm not doing painting, especially painting, um, but even if I'm not like doing research or something like that, I start to get depressed. You know, just depressed that I'm not doing that and I'm not fulfilling that part of me that needs to do it.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there's something I wanted to ask you before and I completely forgot. When you're talking about your Mickey Mantle piece that you did, that's
Sure.
at your parents' house. How have you and your work developed over that time period, from then to now?
I mean, the thing is, I think that I always try to get better with every painting. You know, I kind of always want each painting to be better than the last. I think since then, you know, that first painting was, I did that in 2002, so it's almost 20 years. Um, I think that my my uh, my style or whatever, I think it's a bit more refined. Like I think I've kind of tightened up a bit, tightened up in terms of the finish of the painting, because that first Mickey Mantle painting was almost very expressionistic. So it wasn't, I guess, it wasn't as photorealistic, I guess, even though I don't love that word. But I was just very concerned with the way kind of paint would go on the surface and like what kind of brushstroke was left in its wake, and kind of optical blending of colors and things like that. And it wasn't, it just wasn't as tight, as they say. And now I think it, you know, I've gotten tighter, and I find myself kind of returning to being interested in, you know, the calligraphy of my stroke or whatever, and being into different things like creating certain textures in a painting. And I just feel like every time I do something, every time I do a painting, I'm learning something new. I'm learning how to solve a different problem. Um, you know, the hard thing is that, like, when you get to the point where you can solve a certain problem in painting, at least the way I find it is, when you get to the point where you can solve a problem, you automatically become aware of about 3 more problems that you didn't know were there. Like you've kind of leveled up, and now you have 3 more things to worry about, and then you kind of deal with them, and then 3 more arise from each of those. So it's like this never-ending flowering thing of insanity.
It's that's interesting. Is it like a piece then that you really don't like doing, like say noses or ears? Do you ever like do your piece and go, oh man, now I've got to do the eyes, or
There's not so much there's not so much that, like, there isn't necessarily a part that I don't like doing. I mean, some parts are more laborious than others. So say like on those panoramics, the crowd scenes, usually those can be a bit taxing, just kind of physically, like
Mhm.
the time it takes to do that, because a lot of it ends up being pretty repetitive and whatever. Um, but there are times when I'll look at a painting that I did a couple years before, and I'll just focus on this one area that I think just could be better, just something that I just didn't notice or didn't understand when I had done the painting that I would love to fix now. And sometimes that's just like a painting thing, like a technique thing. Other times it's a historical accuracy thing, like getting the color of a sign wrong or something like that,
Okay.
which happens. And I've been known to contact the people who own the paintings and ask them to send it back to me so I can fix it. And that's happened a couple times, which, I feel weird about doing sometimes, but I also just have this need to like get the stuff right. It's a
Yeah.
weird obsession.
Yeah. Well, I suppose pride in your work as well. I suppose, especially if you're working from black and white and you're making it into what it is.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely understand. I suppose that brings us up to to the Negro League project. What did the Negro Leagues mean to you? I mean, I've seen your work that's on your website and the stuff, but for those that may not have seen it, do you want to let us know a bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, I so I when I started doing this baseball stuff, I I knew a little bit about the Negro Leagues, but I didn't necessarily know all that much more than your kind of average fan. I'm ashamed to say, I knew Satchel Paige, I knew Josh Gibson, I knew the names, I knew some of the team names, but I recently, in the past couple of years, I was doing this large project with or for another collector. He commissioned me to do. It was 230 portraits, small portraits of different Negro Leaguers. It was just a project that he put together that he wanted to kind of display an exhibit to start at the Negro League Baseball Museum to kind of celebrate the centennial of the formation of the Negro National League. And in doing this project and doing all these different players, I mean, I got to learn so much more about these leagues and so much more about all these players, uh, about these about these teams. Uh, and I think, on a more profound level, I think I was able to kind of get in check the the fact that I'm painting these men and women, and I really try to paint them in an honest way. I try to depict them in an honest way. I don't want to really throw any kind of social commentary into it. I kind of want to leave that open to the viewer, um, mainly because I'm white. I'm a white male, and I can't begin to imagine, knowing what it was like, what it is like to be an African American, especially in that era. Whether that's personally or professionally or socioeconomically. Um, So I feel my my best uh, my best foot into this thing is to just kind of do what I do, in that I'm doing research on these men and women, and I'm kind of just showing them as they were. And, you know, it's up to the viewer to kind of come up with his or her own interpretation. So now, being a part of this show, this virtual show from TED, has been, you know, another great opportunity to kind of to do that, to kind of share what I've learned with other baseball fans, or baseball card fans, or whatever, art fans. Um, and just it's been wonderful, and it's something that I think now I have so much more of an appreciation for, and it's something that I will continue to kind of try to do throughout my, like, the rest of my career. Like, I'm so interested in painting these men and women now in a way that I wasn't before. Um, and it goes back to, like, what I mentioned before about, you know, the whole tapestry of the game. It's the Negro Leagues, the Latin American leagues. Like, these players are just as important to the game as Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and those people. So
Yeah,
it's important that they're represented.
yeah, definitely. Are there any players or stories that you found um, really interesting or intriguing, or on the side of that coin, I suppose, upsetting or made you think a bit?
I mean, there are a lot. There are a lot of players who. So like Rube Foster, for instance.
Mm,
You know, I always knew Rube Foster as, you know, being this magnate, like this large man who was always in a suit, who was kind of like, you know, the head of the Negro National League, and was like the face of baseball, and kind of the developer of that business. But learning that, you know, he was actually one of the best pitchers of his era, and doing artwork, like seeing images of him as a younger man, still kind of a, you know, a big dude, but a bit more svelte, but, you know, in a baseball uniform, and hearing about the way he pitched, that was amazing. And then, you know, on more of a broad sense, learning about how people like Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige, how they would go to Latin American countries during the winter to continue playing, um, where they could play for these teams, and they could leave the United States and go to these countries where they were literally treated like royalty,
yeah,
where they didn't have the same restrictions that they had here in the States. You know, they were paid very well to go there, and they faced, you know, great competition, and the fans absolutely, you know, adored these guys. So, you know, just kind of becoming aware of that, um, that was kind of, you know, an eye-opening thing too. It's I can't. It's hard to kind of. It's hard to articulate how profound, you know, this whole project has been over these past few years, doing those paintings and being involved with this art project, you know, with Tad and the other artists.
yeah.
It's so much.
What is it that you're actually doing for the Negro League project?
So what I am doing is this exhibit that I had at the museum earlier in the year. The fellow who put it together produced a couple of products that involved these players and managers and moguls. Some of these products were like postcard sets and bobbleheads and baseball card sets and things like that. And you know, proceeds from all of this stuff would go back to the museum and back to the estates of the players who were depicted. And what I did, since like pretty backlogged, and I couldn't really provide anything original.
Yeah.
What I did was I took 2 of the postcard sets and 1 of the baseball card sets, and I signed every card in each one, and I just kind of put them up on eBay last week. I think they end tomorrow
Yes.
at around 3 o'clock my time or something like that.
Yeah, as I've looked
Yeah.
before, there's quite a high. Do you know how much is bid on them at the moment?
I knew an hour ago. I saw. I don't know if it's changed since then.
About $800, I think it was. Once it
Yeah,
got
which
high.
is amazing.
Yeah, I won't check it now because I've got other stuff and I'll probably get sidetracked and look at bits I've been bidding on.
Yeah, it's just I'm so glad that people are into it, into whatever it is I'm doing and whatever it is these other artists are doing, and uh, I'm really I'm just blessed to be able to do what I do, and I'm just so glad that I can give back to the museum also. And I feel like it's something that I'm going to continue doing for the rest of my life, because the museum means a lot to me now,
Yeah,
on a personal level, and them being as open and receptive uh, to me, earlier in the year, and putting together that show, like treating me like family, was amazing. So
so
they
was the
always.
show in the museum?
It was, yeah. It was
Oh
in the
wow.
museum. Yeah, it opened up in it opened up on February 13th, and it was open for about a month, and then COVID happened and closed the museum down. And by the time the museum reopened, they could only have the show up for about another month.
Mm.
So now I think the show is at, or at least part of the show is at the Bobblehead Hall of Fame in Milwaukee, and I think next year the collector who owns all the stuff, he is in talks with Bob Kendrick to, I guess, have the paintings in a traveling exhibit from the museum. But I'm not sure what the status of that is. But
That's cool. That's really cool. Have
yeah,
you, have you been to the museum yourself?
yeah. I actually showed up for that opening
Amazing.
on February 13th. It was just so great.
What was it like?
I mean, what's interesting about it is that it's a very, in terms of its size, it's not huge. It's not a huge museum, but it paints uh, such a real picture about what it was like to be a player in these leagues, and kind of give viewers a history lesson, um, and a very relatable history lesson, especially if Bob Kendrick is there, because he's a master storyteller. um, it's just the way it impacts you, learning about what these men and women kind of went through just to play ball,
Mm-hmm.
to make a living, and to do, to kind of navigate through this country, and the world, as ball players, and as African American men and women. uh, I again, it's like the profundity of it is kind of like, it's beyond my scope of understanding. It's just, you leave the museum feeling kind of so grateful that it exists, and thinking that everybody needs to see it, and everybody needs to learn about these players and these leagues, and also at the same time being kind of, being disgusted that these leagues had to happen, that these men and women were excluded from playing in the white leagues, and that they had to literally, go form their own organizations. um, it's such a myriad of weird emotions.
Yeah, I can imagine. Imagine I've never been to the States, but I find that a lot of places I want to go to, it's not like Disneyland or Universal Studios. I do find myself wanting to go to places of interest like the museum and like Field of Dreams and stuff like that. It's
Right.
But yeah, the museum's on top of the list for places I want to go and see, just because of the history
magical.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really something else.
Cool. Greg, that sort of brings us towards the end of the conversation, which has been fantastic. Thank you again so much for your time. Tradition on my show that I leave the last word open to the guest. So, Greg Kreindler, the floor is yours. Anything you want to say or shout outs?
Sure. I'll do weird shout outs. I want to thank my parents and thank, my wife and my kids for being in my life and being as supportive and wonderful as they are. And at the same time, I just, I'm grateful for you, Matt, for having me on and giving me a platform to talk about my work and also to talk about this, this art project with all of the other artists. I just kind of implore everyone to go and, check out their website, which is nlbmart.com.
Yep.
And look for some art because you have stuff all over the place in varying styles and varying price points, and you're sure to find something that you like, and just know that a portion of the proceeds or all of the proceeds, depending on the artist, is going to go back to the museum, and it's going to help them get their message out to more people, which is incredibly important.
Yeah, well said. And where can we find you on social medias and the World Wide Web?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is my name, Graig, Graig, Kreindler, Kreindler. I'm also on Facebook. I might even be on some other social media sites that I don't even remember using anymore. I think I have a Tumblr somewhere, maybe Pinterest. I think as long as you can find, if you can spell my name kind of right or almost right, you can probably find me.
I know my MySpace is still active. I don't use it. Too. It's just still floating around there. It's ridiculous. I can't remember the password to take it down. So it's like, no.
Just leave it. Just leave it there. It's like a nice time capsule you can return to in like another 30 years.
Yeah, different life back then, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But Greg, thanks again. Thanks so much for popping on the show. I'll make sure to put all your social media links and your website links in the show notes as well. People be sure to go and check out Greg's work. It is just stunning. It's beautiful stuff.
Thank you,
and thank you very much for your time. And I'll chat to you soon.
Thank you. Yes.
Take care.
Thanks, Matt.
Ta-ra.